Marla Tumbleworth's first impression of the Galactic Council's main entrance was that it looked more like an interstellar opera house than the seat of universal legislation. Swirling columns rose to a vaulted ceiling studded with shifting lights, each shimmering in precise geometric patterns. Holographic banners announced ongoing sessions in 47 different languages that Marla couldn't read, though she noted that one message flashed a color suspiciously close to Earth's neon pink, accompanied by large exclamation marks. Beneath her feet, the polished floor mirrored her reflection with unnerving clarity. She paused to take in the grandeur, sipping from a paper cup of coffee that still steamed despite her long journey from Earth. She wasn't exactly sure how she'd gotten the invitation. A dusty antique shop in a half-abandoned suburb of New Chicago had yielded a small metal card that glowed faintly when she touched it. Scribed on its surface was an odd code for Z Alpha. The vendor had insisted it was part of a cosmic joke and sold it for the price of a bag of used postcards. But a few days later, Marla had discovered that scanning the card on her battered home 3D printer triggered a short-lived portal. Next thing she knew, she found herself stepping out of a flickering transportation gate in some far corner of the galaxy, carrying her travel bag and the last remains of her morning coffee. She approached a tall reception podium flanked by glowing pillars that looked like frozen lightning. Behind the podium stood a slender being with a single enormous eye, the rest of its face hidden behind swirling pale blue patterns that could have been facial features or just elaborate tattoos. The being wore a uniform decorated with too many medals to count, each glinting every time the overhead lights changed hue. "Hello," said Marla, projecting her voice in her friendliest tone. She had been told that the universal translator woven into the Council's environment would handle cross-species communication. It did, but with a short delay, so her greeting echoed back in a watery version of Standard Galactic. The single-eyed being blinked once, then made a series of quick gestures over a crystalline console. "You are from Earth," it said. The translator's voice was calm, though the swirl of colors on the being's face flickered rapidly. "Your planet of origin is classified as Deathworld. Please present your purpose of visit." Marla fished the metal card from her jacket pocket and laid it on the podium. "I have this invitation. It said I was invited to a council session. I'm not entirely sure how official that is." She offered a smile that only slightly faltered under the unblinking stare of the official. "But I figure if I was able to arrive here, maybe it's legit." The official scanned the card with a flick of a slender device. For several seconds, the podium glowed red, then green, then displayed an unreadable string of alien text. The single-eyed being made a startled sound, possibly a gasp. "Code 4Z, Alpha recognized. This is unexpected. One moment, please." Its swirling facial patterns changed from pale blue to a spiky lilac color that Marla guessed might equate to confusion or alarm. Then, the podium's overhead lights flashed a bright orange. A siren-like sound blared across the lobby. From Marla's left, a group of guards in silver uniforms sprinted forward, each brandishing a sleek staff that crackled with arcs of contained energy. "Excuse me," Marla said, eyebrows lifting. "Is that an alarm?" She glanced from the single-eyed official to the approaching guards. They were fanning out, knees bent, as if expecting her to lunge at them with fangs bared. "Is something wrong?" "Remain still," barked one of the guards, his voice trembling despite his authoritative stance. "By Council Security Directive, we are required to contain any Deathworlder who gains unauthorized entry to the premises." His staff made a sharp whirring noise. "Unauthorized." Marla held up her coffee defensively, as though it might shield her. "Didn't your machine just confirm the invitation?" The single-eyed official blinked so fast, it was like a camera shutter fluttering. "The invitation is valid, but you are also flagged as a Class 5 threat. Both statements are true. We must investigate further." Marla realized that in the time it took her to process that, 3 more guards had emerged from a side corridor, all leveling their crackling staves in her direction. She sighed and took another swig of her coffee, finishing it off in one gulp. "I guess I've gotten worse welcomes at some Earth clubs, but this is a new record for me." "Fine, investigate away." Before the guards could do more than stare, she extended her empty hands. I'm cooperating. Maybe you can just point me to a seat so I can wait until someone with more authority clarifies this bureaucratic snafu. The nearest guard, a tall creature with 2 sets of arms, frowned in a nearly human expression of suspicion. State your identity. Marla Tumbleworth from Earth. She paused, then added in a sardonic murmur, Scourge of the cosmos, apparently. The universal translator coughed out an awkward rephrasing, which came across in a hollow mechanical voice as Marla Tumbleworth, Earthspawn, bringer of cosmic peril. At once, the guard stiffened. 2 of them whispered frantically into their comlinks. Marla nearly facepalmed. That's not exactly what I said, but it was too late. The guard with 2 sets of arms declared, We must call for an immediate security lockdown. Then, in the same breath, he barked, No sudden movements. Marla gave him an exasperated shrug. I'm literally standing still with an empty coffee cup. The translator helpfully spat out. I may appear disarmed, but my cunning remains unstoppable. That was apparently the final straw. The alarm blared louder. The overhead lights pulsed from orange to an ugly shade of red, and somewhere behind the podium, a large metal gate screeched closed. The single-eyed official started pushing more buttons, none of which seemed to calm the situation. 2 additional guards scurried in, talking about an immediate threat protocol. Marla rolled her eyes. 10 seconds into the building, and I've got half your security force ready to pounce. This must be a record. Soon, she was marched down a corridor lined with ominous panels, each flickering with alien glyphs. The guards insisted she keep her hands visible. She did so, mostly because she suspected that making a break for it would only turn comedic infusion into actual violence. She muttered under her breath about universal translators that needed sarcasm software updates, but no one seemed inclined to lighten up. Eventually, they arrived at a small, sterile-looking chamber full of scanning equipment. The walls hummed with a dull resonance that made her ears tingle. The 2 sets of arms guards stood by, while a short, beetle-like technician rolled out a device that resembled a dentist's X-ray machine combined with an amusement park ride. They ushered Marla toward it. I swear, she said, stepping onto the platform, I only came because that card said I was invited. Didn't realize you folks were so jumpy. The translator turned her statement into something that must have been horrifying because the technician's antennae rattled so violently he almost dropped his scanning tool. The guard sighed, switched the translator to a different setting, and said, Try speaking slowly. So Marla tried, carefully enunciating, I am cooperating. I do not threaten anyone. The translator beeped, paused, then offered, I am passively exuding minimal malice. Close enough, Marla said, rolling her eyes. She stood still as the machine whirred and traced lines of green light across her body. The humming in the walls grew more intense. A series of beep-bop buzz signals came from the readout. The short technician read them, blinking rapidly. Then he turned to the guard. She's physically within the normal parameters for a human. Bipedal structure, single heart organ, minimal phasic interface. His voice was reedy, modulated by the translator. But her adrenaline response is abnormal. She's strangely calm for a Deathworlder in captivity. Marla let out a soft laugh. Calm? Buddy, I was raised on Earth, had 3 siblings, a part-time job during college, and daily traffic commutes. This is nothing. She was pretty sure her words came out as a monotone approximation of her actual statement. The guard frowned at her, uncertain whether to interpret it as bravado or sarcasm. They told her to wait, and so began a series of forms, scans, more forms, and a repeated loop of suspicious glances. Somewhere along the line, she realized that the entire fiasco might revolve around the fact that Earth had a classification, Deathworld. She'd heard the rumor that various alien species considered Earth insane for its constant disasters, shifting climates, lethal fauna, and unstoppable humans. That label apparently had preceded her arrival, painting her as some unstoppable agent of chaos. Sure enough, after about an hour of waiting on a stiff metal bench, she was informed by a flustered bureaucrat named Mr. Ubik that the council had convened an emergency meeting specifically to deal with her presence. Emergency meeting, she repeated. Because of me? Mister. Ubik was a tall, spindly creature whose neck seemed to extend whenever he was distressed. Yes, MS. Tumbleworth, he said, flicking through a stack of electric blue data sheets. The moment the system recognized you as both a legitimate invitee and a Deathworlder, protocol states we must hold a session to decide your status. You might be permitted to remain, or you might be forcibly ejected from council space. That depends on the hearing. Marla massaged her temples. Look, I just want to find out why that invitation existed, and maybe talk to someone who can clarify. I'm not here to wage war or anything. I didn't even bring my lunch. Mister. Ubik's neck elongated a full 3 inches. Well, we shall see. Then he consulted a form labeled 128B, Biological Irregularity Interrogation. You need to fill out a short questionnaire. Are you harboring any microorganisms that can devour titanium? Do you harbor telepathic powers? She stared at him. We have colds, flus, maybe some questionable hot dog stands that cause regret, but devouring titanium? No. She paused. And no telepathy, either. The translator repeated this back in a near-literal form, and Mr. Ubik nodded with obvious relief. Thank you, MS. Tumbleworth. Now, if you'll come with me, we'll escort you to a holding lounge, an assigned place for foreign dignitaries who require special observation. Her eyebrows shot up. Special observation? He gave a nervous flutter of the hands. It's basically a comfortable waiting room, with minimal restraints. Marla sighed. All right, lead on. But can I at least get a refill of coffee somewhere around here? Coffee. Mister. Ubik checked his data sheets. That's an earth beverage, correct? There are rumors it can accelerate cognitive function and induce mania. I'll have to submit a request. It might take a few hours to be approved. Great, Marla muttered. My day can't get any better. Can it? A squad of guards accompanied her and Mr. Ubik, traveling through broad hallways lined with statues of all shapes and sizes. Sculptures depicted heroic events or important treaties, though many had titles Marla couldn't decipher. She noticed at least 3 statues that looked suspiciously like a big, glitching swirl with the words Peace Accord of Grun's Nebula, but the translator gave no helpful context, only historical significance, medium. She was led into a wide corridor where multiple doorways branched off. She glimpsed bizarre sights through open portals. A floating disk of liquid that might have been some alien's personal quarters. A hatch leading downward that read, Maintenance and Philosophical Disposal. A small room labeled Interspecies Etiquette Crash Course. That last one might have been helpful, she thought drily. At last, they arrived at a modest suite with a couch, a desk, and a large window that overlooked what appeared to be a grand assembly chamber far below. The lights in that assembly flickered in elaborate patterns, and small figures bustled about. She guessed that was where the emergency meeting would take place. 2 guards took up positions outside the door, and Mr. Ubik cleared his throat. Make yourself comfortable, MS. Tumbleworth. The council session will commence soon. They will summon you to speak or to face clarifications. His expression was difficult to read, but the translator kindly labeled it as subdued anxiety. Then he bustled away, data sheets crackling under his arm. Marla sank onto the couch. She took a moment to process the journey so far. She had half a mind to attempt an escape, but where would she go? She was in a massive, labyrinthine government building on an alien world. Even if she did break out, she had no idea how to operate the complex transit system that had brought her here in the first place. She considered rummaging in her bag for a snack, but realized she hadn't packed anything beyond some gum. With a sigh, she unwrapped a piece of mint gum. At least the comforting flavor of Earth might calm her nerves. She turned to gaze out the window at the swirling lights of the assembly chamber. Time passed in a haze of anxious boredom. Occasionally, she heard footsteps in the corridor, murmured voices, or a distant alarm that might have been triggered by something else entirely. At last, a new figure appeared in her open doorway. Marla turned to see a being that was partially metal, partially organic, with patches of silvery plating on an otherwise blue-gray body. It wore a modest uniform with the words Archive Division etched on a small badge. The being lifted a hand in greeting. "Hello," it said. The translator rendered the voice as soft, slightly quavering. "My name is Elder. I was asked to confirm your historical classification. Are you indeed from Earth?" Marla nodded. "That's me." Elder hesitated. "I've heard stories about humans. The records in the archives are quite contradictory. Some depict your species as unstoppable apex predators. Others describe humans as sentimental creatures that adopt dangerous animals for pleasure. There are even references to your comedic sense of doom." Marla snorted. "We do have a weird sense of humor, I'll admit. It's how we cope, I guess." Elder's metallic patches glinted under the lights. "Could I ask how you obtained the 4Z Alpha invitation code? It's extremely old, predating many council reforms. We didn't think it could actually function in modern systems. It was more of a ceremonial artifact." She shrugged. "I found it in a shop. It glowed when I touched it, so maybe it recognized my humanness." She paused. "I thought I'd come and see what it was about. So far, I've been scanned, locked up, and labeled a threat. Not exactly the best welcoming committee." Elder shifted. "Yes, well, the Council does not handle unpredictability well, especially unpredictability from a Deathworld species. Earth is famous for generating anomalies the rest of us can't easily explain." Marla rubbed the back of her neck. "Look, is there a simpler way to sort this out? I don't want to cause trouble, but I'd like to speak to someone higher up, maybe Chancellor Grumhold or whoever is in charge." Elder hesitated. "That might be possible during the session. However, for what I've overheard, the Council is leaning toward a formal trial of sorts. They want to ascertain if your presence constitutes a cosmic threat or a diplomatic fiasco." She almost laughed. "Sounds like they've already decided it's fiasco at minimum." A faint flicker passed over Elder's metallic patches, which might have been an attempt at a smile. "I wouldn't blame you for thinking so. On the bright side, many of us are curious. We've never met a human face-to-face. The archive contains incomplete data. Some files reference your sense of humor in catastrophic events, your contradictory habits of kindness and aggression, your creation of unbelievably dangerous weapons alongside adorable domestic creatures you call cats." Marla sighed. "Cats, yeah, well, they're a mixed bag. So what happens now?" Elder lowered his voice. "I'm not entirely sure, but if you require assistance or someone to confirm your innocence, well, I can't exactly speak on your behalf, but I can provide documented context. Possibly I could show the Council that you're not some rampaging demon." She eyed Elder carefully. "Would you do that? Why help me?" Elder's plating shifted color again. "I'm an archivist. I value information over rumor. I like to see facts triumph over fear. And if the Council decides to expel or harm you simply because of prejudice, that wouldn't be right." Marla felt a surge of relief. "Thank you," she said softly. "Let's hope reason prevails in this place." Shortly thereafter, Elder excused himself. The lounge door shut again, leaving Marla alone. She chewed her gum, stared out at the assembly below, and wondered if reason stood any chance in a place that had greeted her with literal sirens. She passed another hour pacing the room, occasionally pressing her ear to the door to see if she could catch snatches of conversation from the guards. Most of what she heard was muffled, but she caught references to Chancellor Grumhold's meltdown, protocol override, and "I heard they once banished an entire species for bringing contaminated pastry." That last snippet made her question the seriousness of this council's approach to problem solving. Eventually, a different guard arrived, curtly announced that the emergency session was ready for her testimony, and escorted her out. This time, the corridor was busier. Various staffers hurried about, talking in hushed tones. A hush fell each time they passed Marla, though, as if no one wanted to speak too loudly in the presence of a Deathworlder. She kept her hands visible, doing her best not to look threatening, though apparently the translator was still messing up half her remarks. They guided her onto a hover platform that descended smoothly toward the main assembly hall. From above, she saw row upon row of seats arranged in a circular layout, some seats sized for large, bulky species, others for petite, floating creatures. At the very center was a raised dais surrounded by transparent barriers. Lights flickered overhead, reflecting off a high-domed ceiling. The hush in the chamber was tangible. Her arrival drew every eye, orb, antenna, or other ocular apparatus. She was led onto the dais, where she could see a wide ring of council members in their designated seats. At the head of the circle was a robed figure swirling with shifting colors. Chancellor Grumhold, presumably. The translator indicated that the Chancellor's body was made of an advanced gaseous form, highly reactive to emotional states. He was flanked by assistants who looked like they were ready to intervene if he started fizzing. A hush settled. Then the Chancellor's amplified voice reverberated through the chamber. We convene this session of the Galactic Council to address the unexpected arrival of Marla Tumbleworth, a confirmed Earthling from the Deathworld classification. She possesses invitation code 4Z Alpha, an artifact from older protocols. She claims no hostile intent. We are here to determine the truth. Marla took a breath. Thank you, Chancellor. The translator turned her words into a gritty metallic statement that sounded faintly aggressive. The Chancellor's swirling body flickered. She tried again, slower, stepping forward. I come in peace. The code led me here. I had no plan to harm anyone or disrupt your processes. This time, the translator gave something approximating her meaning, though it added a bizarre comedic flourish at the end, concluding with, I had no plan to devour or disrupt your processes this time. A ripple of alarmed murmurs passed through the council. Some members recoiled. One alien with a cluster of eyes began frantically speaking into a device. Marla's shoulders sagged. Translator glitch. I'm not devouring anything. I just want to find out why I was invited. An older council member with a face reminiscent of a flattened lizard banged a staff against the floor. Invited? That code was never meant to be used. It's ceremonial. Another counselor, a tall insectoid, hissed, ceremonial or not, it triggered the system. She's here. We must handle this carefully. Marla raised her voice again. Look, could someone fix the translator so it doesn't turn me into a cosmic monster every time I open my mouth? A smaller beep sounded from the dais. A rolling mechanism with multiple mechanical arms came forward, adjusting a control panel at the translator station. The static in the air seemed to lessen, and she tried again. I am Marla Tumbleworth, from Earth, and I truly do not wish to cause trouble. The invitation code was in my possession. I used it out of curiosity. If I'm not supposed to be here, I can just go. But I prefer not to be treated as a universal threat. Chancellor Grumhold's swirling form stabilized somewhat. We have extensive records on humanity, he said. Your species is known for resilience, unpredictability, and capacity for both extreme violence and altruism. You are regarded as complicated. Earth's environment has produced apex predators that many in the galaxy find horrifying. Yet your species coexists with these predators in odd ways. Our council's fear is not unfounded. Marla bit her tongue, choosing words carefully. We do have a complicated background. War, yes, but also cooperation. We have art, compassion, insane humor, and everything in between. We're survivors. We adapt. And sometimes, we invite ourselves to places we shouldn't be. A faint stir rippled through the assembly. But let's not forget, your system recognized the code, so it must hold some validity. Maybe someone here can enlighten me about that old protocol. Murmurs swept around the circular chamber. Eventually, a different counselor, one with an elongated neck and a softly glowing crest, spoke up. Indeed, the code 4Z Alpha was crafted millennia ago, intending to invite a powerful ally in times of crisis. It's rumored that any being who can successfully present it is, well, the wording is archaic. Something about a champion or a final harbinger. The counselor's crest flickered in nervous patterns. We never expected a Deathworlder to just appear and claim it. Marla folded her arms. I don't want to harbinge anything. I just found a shiny card. Chancellor Grumhold exhaled a swirling plume of colored vapor. We do not know if you present a threat or an unexpected solution. Our protocols demand a thorough evaluation. However, many in this council are uneasy about your presence. Earth is no trivial place. She spread her hands. If it eases your minds, I can submit to your evaluations. I've already done a bunch of scanning. I have no hidden weapons. My only real advantage is that I grew up with day-to-day chaos back on Earth. So your bureaucracy is just a new flavor of confusion for me. A hush followed. Then the entire council burst into chatter, half of them turning to one another, some pulling out devices. Chancellor Grumhold called for order, and the swirling lights overhead flashed. We shall recess to consider your status. Security remains on high alert. You will be placed into a secure lounge for dignitaries. His tone suggested that her presence had already caused enough of a stir. In the meantime, you are not to roam the council complex unescorted. We will reconvene once we have reached a preliminary decision on how to classify this incursion. Before Marla could protest, a pair of guards gently but firmly guided her out of the assembly chamber. She was taken to a new lounge, this one with bigger windows and a far more luxurious couch, presumably to reflect that she was something akin to a special detainee. Quiver and release a tiny squeak. That was weird enough to occupy her for about 10 minutes, but after that, she was left with her own restless thoughts. After an indeterminate wait, time was hard to track without her phone or a reliable day-night cycle. She heard a faint knocking. To her surprise, Elder, the archivist from earlier, slid in. He carried a small device in his arms, glowing with a faint purple light. He bowed his head politely, then glanced at the door. I had to pass multiple checkpoints to get here, he said quietly. The council is in disarray. Some wanted to port you at once. Others are curious if you might be the ally from prophecy. It's quite the spectacle. Marla rolled her eyes. I'm not sure who decided to write prophecies about random Earth visitors. So, does that mean I'm stuck here indefinitely? Elder took a seat on the opposite end of the couch. They plan to hold a formal hearing soon. If it goes poorly, you might be exiled. If they can't reach consensus, they'll delay the decision for days. But I have an idea that might help if you're willing to take a risk. She raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. The archivist glanced at the device in his arms. I found references to a hidden repository deep in the council's sublevel. It contains artifacts from Earth that the council once tried to study, but ultimately feared. I suspect your invitation code might be linked to them. If we can present a rational explanation for how these artifacts tie to your presence, we might prove you're not an immediate threat. Or at least we can show that the council's fear is based on incomplete data. Marla smirked. How do we get down there? The place is swarming with security. Elder's metallic plating flickered. We'll have to be stealthy. I have access to certain archive corridors. If we're careful, and you don't say anything that sets off alarms again, we might get through. She eyed him warily. There's a high chance I'll set something off. The translator hates me. He gave a tiny shrug. Then speak as little as possible, or rely on my ID to pass the checkpoints. Let's do this before the council organizes the trial. Marla stood, glancing at the door. All right, lead on. But if we get caught, I hope you have a quick explanation for wandering around with the galaxy's favorite menace. Elder's attempt at a reassuring smile was overshadowed by the nervous flicker of his plating. Still, he opened the lounge door a crack, peered out, and motioned for her follow. They slipped into the corridor, keeping to the edges. Lucky for them, the council staff seemed preoccupied with frantic messages about the upcoming hearing. At one corner, they nearly collided with a roving maintenance drone. Elder quickly flashed an archive badge and murmured something about official retrieval. The drone chirped, scanned them with a flicker of light, then rolled away. They made their way to a side passage that led to a descending ramp. A sign overhead read, Subterranean Maintenance and Philosophical Disposal, in letters that rippled across the metal. Elder explained that this area was rarely visited except by specialized teams who handled weird or dangerous artifacts. A locked hatch blocked the way, but Elder pressed his device to a small panel, and the door slid open with a reluctant hiss. The temperature dropped noticeably as they descended. Dim lights hummed overhead, flickering in irregular patterns. The corridor branched off in several directions, each passage lined with thick metal doors. Elder guided her deeper, occasionally checking a small map on his device. At one intersection, they passed a door that bore a large warning sign in multiple languages, including an awkward English translation. Danger. Emotional collapse possible. Marla tried not to stare too long. Finally, they arrived at a sealed door labeled Earth Studies, Restricted. Elder's plating glowed. This is it, he said softly. If the code 4Z Alpha has a link to Earth artifacts, we'll find it here. He fiddled with the control panel near the door. At first, it refused his input, displaying a stern red message. Then he typed in a different sequence. The door gave a heavy groan and slid open a few inches, enough for Elder to wedge it apart. They slipped inside, hearts pounding. The room was large, more like a warehouse than a simple storage area. Rows of tall shelves extended into the gloom, filled with containers of all shapes and sizes. A faint, musty smell hung in the air, reminding Marla of old libraries, though the origin was presumably alien. She saw labels with alien script, some with half-decayed Earth letters. One container read, fidget spinner, handle with caution. Another read, karaoke machine, unsafe frequencies. Marla felt a grin tug at the corners of her mouth. So, this is what they fear about Earth, huh? Brought by early explorers or traded by black market merchants. The Council ended up banning further import from Earth because they found the items too unpredictable or too culturally disruptive. They never found a consistent logic behind them. He pulled up a file on his device. Ah, here it is. Reference to 4Z Alpha. Let's see if the physical artifact is stored nearby. They followed the map to a locked cabinet. Elder used the same method to open it, revealing a dusty old chest that might have once been a pirate's treasure box if pirates used space-age metals. A faint glow emanated from within. This must be the object, Elder whispered, gently lifting the lid. Inside lay a small crystalline sphere about the size of an orange. It pulsed with a gentle light, as if it were alive. Beside it was a tarnished plaque in Earth's English that read, Universal Invitation Key. Do not mishandle. Marla's eyes widened. Universal Invitation Key. That sounds suspiciously relevant. Elder studied the item with a mixture of awe and apprehension. I suspect the key and your code are related. The invitation code might have been tied to this key. Once you triggered the code, it reactivated the key's function. But the Council never realized it was in your possession or that a human would stumble upon it. Marla carefully reached in and lifted the sphere. It was surprisingly light, warm to the touch. The pulsing light briefly intensified, as if greeting her. She felt a slight tingle in her fingertips, a bizarre but not unpleasant sensation. What do you think it does, exactly? She asked softly. I only have partial records, Elder replied, scrolling through his device. Apparently, it was developed ages ago when a group of alien scientists and some human travelers collaborated. They wanted a universal pass that could open diplomatic doors if the galaxy was ever in crisis. But it fell out of use, maybe because the Council feared that handing such access to humans was too risky. Marla raised an eyebrow. So they buried it down here instead. Then some random Earth antique store ended up with the code that links to this thing, and I stumbled in like an idiot. Now the Council is freaking out because I triggered an ancient protocol. They both jumped at the sound of a muffled alarm in the corridor outside. Lights overhead began flashing. Elder hissed in alarm, his plating shifting to a dull black color that read as fear. Security must have detected unauthorized access. We need to go. Marla clutched the sphere. We can't just leave it here, can we? It might be the proof we need that I'm not here to cause trouble. This key is older than all their fear-based protocols. Elder nodded, his voice trembling. Yes, take it. Maybe if the Council sees that you hold it properly, they'll realize you're not a threat. Or it will confirm their worst fears that you can override their security. Let's hope not. They heard footsteps racing down the hall outside. Marla glanced left and right, searching for another exit. She spotted a narrow side door that read Artifact Disposal. With no other choice, they dashed for it, ducking behind a row of tall crates just as a squad of guards burst into the main storeroom. The guards barked orders, scanning the area with handheld devices that beeped frantically. Elder pushed the side door open, and they hurried through a cramped passage. The corridor beyond smelled faintly of chemicals. They passed large drums labeled "Do Not Open Sentient Slime" and a rattling container with blinking lights. Ahead, an elevator door glowed. Marla pushed the button, but the panel displayed offline. She cursed under her breath. The translator turned it into something deeply obscene in the local language, judging by Elder's horrified look. "No time," Elder said. "We can double back. Try a different route." They ran. Behind them, the guards' footsteps grew louder. Marla clutched the sphere, pulse pounding. The corridor twisted, leading them back toward some unknown wing of the sublevel. At last, they emerged into an open area ringed with odd mechanical contraptions. A sign overhead read, "Experimental Disposal Section." The air hummed with an unsettling frequency. An alarmed guard noticed them. "Halt!" he shouted. His staff crackled with contained electricity. Another guard tried to flank them, sealing off the path forward. Marla felt adrenaline spike in her veins. She swore in frustration, brandishing the sphere as if it were a shield. To her shock, the sphere responded with a faint swirl of luminescence. The guards paused, uncertain whether it was a weapon. Taking advantage of their confusion, Elder pressed a button on a large console, and a thick metal partition slammed down between them and the guards, cutting off pursuit. They ran in the opposite direction, the corridor slanting upward now. Marla's heart pounded. She had no idea where they were going, only that they needed to get away from security. The complex was a maze, and it was pure luck that eventually they spotted a sign reading "Exit to Council Chambers." They followed the arrow, ducking under an archway that led to a final flight of stairs. Elder was panting by the time they climbed the last step. Marla's muscles burned, but she pressed on, the sphere clutched tight. They popped out through a side door into a wide hallway lined with translucent panels. A startled staff member nearly dropped a stack of forms at the sight of them. Elder quickly flashed the archivist badge again. "Vital data for the council," he blurted, which the translator turned into a more official-sounding statement. The staffer blinked and stepped aside. Seconds later, they found themselves at the threshold of the Grand Assembly Chamber once more. The session was in a break, but many counselors were still present, milling about. Guards patrolled the perimeter. As soon as Marla stepped inside, a hush fell. Elder hesitated, then urged her forward. She took a deep breath and walked into the center of the chamber. Arms raised to show she held the sphere and nothing else. One guard rushed forward, staff at the ready, but Chancellor Grumhold, hovering at the dais, raised a swirling limb to halt him. "Wait," commanded the Chancellor, voice tense. "She holds something." Marla slowed, resisting the urge to collapse from the stress of running. She carefully set the crystalline sphere on a raised platform that looked as if it was meant for ceremonial objects. The sphere pulsed with a gentle glow. "I found this," she said, choosing her words with care so the translator wouldn't sabotage her. "It's an ancient Earth artifact, the Universal Invitation Key." Shocked whispers spread around the hall. Some counselors leaned forward in their seats. Others stood in alarm. Marla swallowed hard. "This is apparently the device that ties to my code. It was locked away in your sublevel archives. So, you see, the invitation was real. Nobody's trying to sabotage the council. It's just your own ancient protocol recognized me, a human, as its rightful holder. I don't fully understand why, but that's the truth." A counselor with a shimmering crest approached the dais. "We sealed that artifact long ago. It was too unpredictable, especially in human hands. Are you saying it reactivated?" Marla nodded. "Yes, it responded to me. That's how I managed to get this far. Not because I wanted to infiltrate your precious council, but because the code was basically an open door." Elder stepped forward, albeit nervously. "I can attest to that," he said. "I brought her there to find the artifact. She's telling the truth. The Council has repressed knowledge of Earth's collaborative past with the galaxy. Maybe it's time to revisit those connections, instead of giving in to fear." Chancellor Grumhold's swirling form flickered with sharp color changes. "You violated restricted areas," he said, voice stern, "and you engaged in suspicious behavior. Security nearly declared a containment breach. Yet here you stand, making a claim about an artifact we barely remember." He floated closer to the sphere, as if studying its glow. Then, with a swirl of his vaporous form, he turned back to the assembled counselors. "We must decide if this is a threat or a sign." An older, reptilian-faced counselor hissed, "You can't be serious." The Deathworlder uncovered an item capable of bypassing half our security. "That's no sign of peace." Another snapped, "What if it's destiny?" The code was ancient, and it recognized her. Perhaps the humans are indeed meant to be here. One observer from the upper seats, possibly a staffer or a diplomat's aide, piped up, "I've read about Earth. They can be harsh, but they also form strong bonds. They share affection with carnivorous creatures, and they're known for adopting stray animals out of pity. They're contradictory, but not purely malevolent." Marla cleared her throat, carefully timing her next words so they wouldn't be twisted by the translator. "I might be from a death world, but that doesn't mean I want to kill everything I see. We have compassion. We have humor. We bring both chaos and creativity. Maybe that was the original purpose of your code, to bring new perspective into your system, especially in times of stagnation." Chancellor Grumhold exhaled a swirl of color that might have signaled deep contemplation. "The Council is indeed at an impasse on many issues. We are weighed down by bureaucracy and fear. A part of me wonders if your presence here is the universe's way of shaking us up." A small wave of protest flared among the more conservative counselors. They demanded a formal trial. A handful insisted that Marla be quarantined or exiled. In the midst of the bickering, the crystalline sphere glowed brighter, filling the dais with shimmering light. The effect silenced everyone for a moment. Elder, trembling, whispered, "The artifact reacts to strong disagreements." "It was designed to unify, wasn't it?" Marla placed a hand on the sphere. "If it's truly a key, then let it remind you of your founding principle, to gather species from across the galaxy, even from places you fear, and find common ground. Earth is no paradise, but we're not the apocalypse either. Don't let your fear define your future with us." The hush that followed was palpable. Even the swirling lights overhead seemed subdued, waiting for a verdict. Marla felt her heart hammer in her chest. She wondered if her words had changed anything, or if the council would slam the door on her and her entire species. At last, Chancellor Grumhold turned to the circle of counselors. "I propose a compromise. We do not banish MS Tumbleworth. We grant her a probationary role, an opportunity to demonstrate cooperation. Let her remain within the council, under supervision, as we evaluate the potential alliance her presence might bring. She has proven resourceful, and if we truly fear her unpredictability, let us harness that unpredictability for the greater good. If she truly means no harm, we risk little by permitting a structured stay." A wave of murmurs spread across the chamber. Several nodded in cautious agreement, while others fumed but couldn't present a solid counterargument. Eventually, the Chancellor raised his swirling arms. "All in favor of a supervised alliance with the human, say aye." A surprising number of counselors said aye, or some equivalent in their own languages. The translator system bleeped as it tried to unify them all. The nays were fewer. A moment of tension lingered, but it was clear the majority had voted to accept the Chancellor's proposal. Marla released the breath she had been holding. "So that's it?" she asked softly. "You're not exiling me?" Chancellor Grumhold's body flickered in subdued pastel tones. "We are not exiling you. For now, we will consider you an official ally in testing. Or, as the old prophecy might phrase it, the unplanned champion. We will have many forms for you to fill out, but you will not be tossed into a black hole. Congratulations." Marla felt a bemused laugh bubble in her throat. "Thank you, I think." She glanced over at Elder, who gave her a relieved nod. She set a hand on the sphere, grateful that somehow the ancient artifact had helped shift the council's perspective. It might not be an immediate acceptance of everything human, but it was a start. Over the next day, Her status was formalized. Technically, she was still required to remain in certain areas under council supervision, but she was allowed a small personal suite, much better than the lounge, and given partial credentials to roam. Elder became her informal guide, and the council assigned a guard detail more for symbolic caution than active suspicion. She even obtained approval for coffee once they decided it wasn't some corrosive earth toxin. Though many counselors eyed her warily, others approached with cautious curiosity, asking about earth customs and inventions. She explained small bits, mindful of the translator's comedic oversimplifications. A few misunderstandings still arose. Some believed her descriptions of Earth weather patterns implied that planet-scale storms were daily amusements. But overall, the atmosphere thawed. She learned that the Council was gridlocked on multiple issues: resource-sharing treaties, advanced technology restrictions, and cultural exchange guidelines. The introduction of a Deathworlder ally might offer a new angle, or so the Chancellor hoped. Marla herself had no illusions she was going to fix centuries of bureaucratic inertia, but she tried to be helpful, even if it was just by injecting a sense of humor. She noticed how stunned they were by small talk, by jokes about Earth's weirdness, by her casual references to stressful Earth experiences. They had never considered that a species might laugh at adversity. One afternoon, she was summoned again to the assembly chamber, this time not as a detainee, but as a guest participant. The counselors turned as she arrived, the sphere of invitation still resting on the dais. Chancellor Grumhold greeted her with a swirl of color that the translator described as formal respect. She joined him at the center, facing the ring of seats. He made a sweeping gesture that encompassed the entire hall. "Ms. Tumbleworth," he began, "we have deliberated further on your role here. Many remain cautious, but we also see an opportunity to learn from your species. Thus, by majority vote, we are offering you a seat as an associate observer. You will have limited voting rights, but the authority to propose items for discussion, especially those pertaining to Earth or to the bridging of cultural gaps. Of course, we expect your compliance with Council regulations." Marla tried not to laugh at the idea of her representing Earth, a planet that had no clue about her little trip, but she nodded graciously. "I'll do my best not to offend everyone with my translator issues," she said. The translator played it back in a decent approximation of humility, and a few counselors seemed relieved. One or two even clapped awkwardly, unsure how to greet such a moment. She was ushered to a chair that had been placed near the dais, presumably so the main seats of power wouldn't be overshadowed by the Deathworlder. As she sat, the chair released a faint hum, scanning her posture. A readout in front of her displayed her name in both alien script and a shaky English transliteration. It made her smile, and so began the bizarre dance of her new, half-official position. Day by day, she learned more about the Council's complexities, about the political friction between species who disliked each other's biology or cultural norms. She sat in on sessions where minor issues turned into hours of debate over trifles. Yet she also saw glimpses of genuine cooperation, alliances forging across star systems, relief missions planned for distressed planets. In that environment, she contributed bits of Earth logic, or what she jokingly called Earthologic, to help them see their problems from a fresh angle. Sometimes her suggestions were misunderstood. Other times, they sparked revelations. She formed a small circle of curious friends, including Elder, who introduced her to alien snack foods, some edible, some violently not. She also discovered that many of them were deeply fascinated by Earth music. She played a short clip of a random Earth pop song from her phone, and at least 3 alien ambassadors reacted as if she'd unveiled cosmic secrets. All the while, the presence of the sphere on the dais served as a silent reminder of how precarious her acceptance was. She still encountered skeptics, like the reptilian counselor who never missed a chance to remind everyone that humans were hyperviolent, citing Earth's history of wars. But there were also open-minded species who found humans' chaotic energy intriguing. The Council grew more comfortable, little by little, with her presence. Some even joked that a Deathworlder in their midst made for more entertaining debates. Eventually, Chancellor Grumhold convened a new assembly specifically to address the stale gridlock on the resource treaty that had been the original purpose of the big meeting. Everyone expected the usual marathon of empty rhetoric. But partway through, when negotiations began spiraling into the same old arguments, Marla found herself raising her hand. She hesitated a moment, glancing around the circle of watchful faces, then dared to speak. "Look," she said, "you're all dancing around the problem. You don't trust each other, and your rules about resource distribution are so rigid you can't adapt. On Earth, we learned that sometimes you have to accept short-term discomfort to reach a stable solution. Maybe you can incorporate an exchange of resources on a rotating schedule, a sort of shifting timeshare approach, so each species has equitable access without feeling cheated. Sure, it'll be messy, but might break your endless stalemate." She worried the translator would mangle her meaning, but it didn't do too badly. The counselors blinked, murmuring among themselves. One asked for clarification, and she explained, "On Earth, we do timeshares for property or group resource rotation. Instead of each side feeling robbed, everyone shares the burden." More murmurs. Surprisingly, a few delegates expressed willingness to consider it. The debate resumed, but with an injection of fresh perspective. Marla watched in a mixture of relief and astonishment as the council hammered out preliminary guidelines for a rotating resource allocation. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was progress. By the end, the chancellor's swirling form displayed pastel pink, which the translator read as encouragement. The counselors drifted away, talking about scheduling further negotiations. In the quiet that followed, Grumhold nodded at Marla. "Your brand of logic is unorthodox, but it seems to stir new life into our rigid system. Perhaps we can all learn from Earth if we're not too afraid." She smiled. "Likewise, I've learned how easily an entire galaxy can freak out over a single human stepping through the door. Maybe Earth should consider how we portray ourselves out there." His swirling limbs trembled in what she interpreted as a soft laugh. "Progress rarely arrives neatly packaged. Thank you, MS. Tumbleworth." As time went on, the general consensus was that the galaxy had not imploded from her presence, and the Council's enormous bureaucracy continued chugging forward. She found it oddly comforting that the place was as flawed as Earth's governments. She also discovered that many individuals, from archivists like Elder to minor staffers, were eager to know more about Earth cultural quirks, from rock music to meme culture, though the translator had a field day with the latter, often interpreting meme as collective comedic telepathy. Eventually, she was granted permission to send limited transmissions back to Earth, though the Council insisted on vetting them for security reasons. She composed a short, cryptic message to a friend back home, explaining that she was on an unusual trip. She left out the details of nearly causing an interstellar panic. One evening, after a series of draining committees, she found herself alone in the main chamber. The lights were dimmed, the seats empty. She stepped onto the dais, approaching the small pedestal where the crystalline sphere still glowed softly. She touched its surface, feeling the same gentle warmth that had guided her through all this chaos. "It's funny," she said aloud. "Not sure if anyone was around to hear. You brought me here, and I guess you helped me stay. And I have no clue if I'm doing the right thing, but maybe it's enough that I'm here. Because sometimes the best changes happen when people show up uninvited." She couldn't say for sure if the sphere pulsed in response, or if that was just her imagination. But she felt a sense of calm wash over her. In the background, she heard a distant corridor door open. Turning, she saw a couple of staffers. One was Mr. Ubik, still looking anxious as ever, but he managed a polite nod in her direction. The other was Elder, who offered a small wave, stepping forward as if to check on her. Without speaking, they simply stood together for a moment at the dais, gazing at the swirling lights overhead. It was a silent acknowledgement of how far they'd come since the day alarms blared at Marla's arrival. The memory of that chaotic greeting made her smile wryly. 10 seconds in the door, and security was called. Now, she was part of the council, an improbable twist of fate that perhaps only a Deathworlder could manage. She turned to Elder, and said softly, "Thanks for sticking your neck out for me. I know it wasn't easy." He nodded, plating reflecting the gentle glow. "It was worth it. The galaxy grows a little broader when we're not caged by our own fears." Marla exhaled, letting the swirl of cosmic bureaucracy and comedic mistranslations settle in her mind. She glanced once more at the silent seats that would soon fill with anxious, quarrelsome, hopeful delegates. Then, with a final pat on the sphere, she whispered, "All right, tomorrow, we keep pushing for sense in a place that thrives on confusion. Bring it on." She left the chamber, Elder at her side, pondering how wonderfully absurd it was that a random invitation card from a dusty antique shop had landed her in the center of the galaxy's biggest forum. Maybe humans had a knack for showing up exactly where we weren't expected, and maybe that was the point. Sometimes, all it took to change the course of an entire interstellar council was for one Deathworlder to walk in, defy all assumptions, and refuse to be locked out.